AITA for taking back the keys after my wife gave my late father's cabin to her brother? I'm Andrew, 40. Maya is 36, and we've been married for 11 years at that point. Our daughter, Mia, is 8. For most of our marriage, I thought one of the things Maya and I did well was give each other space when it came to family. I never wanted to be the husband who acted like every favor for an in-law needed my approval. That was probably part of how we got here. Maya has always been protective of her younger brother, Trevor. He's 32, and his life had been rough that year. A long-term relationship ended badly. He was carrying debt, and the apartment he'd managed to keep after the breakup was becoming more than he could afford. None of that made him a bad person. It did, however, make him someone who had gotten very used to his mother and sister stepping in whenever something went wrong. I'd helped him before, too. A few years earlier, when Trevor was between places, he stayed with us for several weeks. I never charged him. I helped him move his stuff into storage, let him use our spare room, and drove with him one Saturday to pick up a used dresser because he didn't have a vehicle big enough. So when Maya said Trevor needed help again, my first reaction wasn't, too bad. The problem was the cabin. My father left it to me when he died 5 years ago. It isn't some giant vacation property with a lake view worth millions. It's small, old, and always seems to need something fixed. One of the porch boards squeaks. The kitchen cabinets don't quite line up. In winter, the back bedroom gets colder than the rest of the place no matter what I do. But it was Dad's. He built the little wooden key rack by the door himself. He taught Mia how to hold a fishing pole off the dock when she was so young, she barely remembers it now. There are pencil marks inside one pantry door where Dad tracked my height when I was a kid. I could replace almost everything in that cabin and still not be able to replace what it meant to me. Maya knew that. She also knew the deed was in my name. The cabin came to me directly through my father's estate. We sometimes used family money for maintenance, and Maya and Mia had always treated it like a family place, which I wanted. But there was never any question about ownership. In hindsight, there had been little things leading up to the anniversary dinner that I didn't connect at the time. A few weeks earlier, Maya asked when I had last been to the cabin. 3 weeks ago, maybe 4, I told her. Then she asked whether we planned to use it much in the next few months. I said I wanted to take Mia up for a weekend before school got busy, but we hadn't put anything on the calendar. Another time, I noticed the spare cabin keys were missing from the kitchen drawer. I assumed Maya had forgotten to put them back after our last trip. She also got unusually irritated when I mentioned we should sit down at the end of the month and look at our repair fund. We had been talking for a while about a major house project, and I wanted to see how much we could comfortably spend. The fund is fine, she said quickly. I know. I just want to plan it out. I said it's fine, Andrew. I remember looking at her because the reaction seemed bigger than the conversation. But Mia was asking for help with homework. Dinner was on the stove, and the moment passed. There was another thing. Trevor had once said to me, I'll pay Maya back every dollar. I know she didn't have to do that. I asked, pay her back for what? He stared at me for half a second too long, then said something vague about her covering a bill when his card was frozen after the breakup. I believed him because I had no reason not to. Our anniversary dinner was supposed to be simple. Maya and I were going out, but Janice, her mother, had pushed for the family to join us for dessert afterward. Trevor came, and so did Maya's Aunt Denise. By the time dessert showed up, Trevor looked uncomfortable in a way I couldn't place. He kept checking Maya's face before speaking. Then Maya reached into her purse and put a set of keys on the table in front of him. At first, I honestly thought she was offering him the cabin for a weekend. Trevor looked at the keys and said, seriously? Maya smiled. You need somewhere stable. We barely use it. I looked from her to Trevor. How long are we talking? I asked. Maya's smile tightened. 6 months. I thought I had misheard her. 6 months. Trevor was already reaching for the keys. Maya said, it gives him time to get back on his feet without throwing money away on another bad lease. I put my hand over the keys before Trevor could pick them up. Who is we in that decision? That was when the table changed. Trevor pulled his hand back. Denise looked down at her plate. Janice immediately sighed like I was being difficult on purpose. Maya said, Andrew not here. I kept my voice low. You just announced it here. Janice leaned toward me. Don't embarrass him over an empty cabin. It's not empty, I said. It belongs to me, and nobody asked me. Maya gave me a look that was half anger, half warning. He needs it more than we do right now. I picked up the keys. Janice said, "This didn't need to become drama if you knew how to think about family." Then nobody should have promised him my cabin at dinner. Trevor muttered, "I didn't know this was going to be a whole thing." That sentence bothered me, but I was too angry to examine why. I told Maya I was leaving. She said we had come together. I said I'd get a ride home if I had to. Denise eventually offered to take Janice and Trevor so Maya could come with me. The ride home was almost silent. Mia was asleep by the time we got back. That mattered because I didn't want her hearing us fight. Maya and I ended up in the kitchen, speaking in harsh whispers. "You humiliated me," she said. I stared at her. "You gave away 6 months of access to something you don't own while I was sitting at the table." "I did not give it away." "What do you call handing him the keys? He needs somewhere to live. The cabin is just sitting there." "That is not an answer." She folded her arms. "You would have said no." I remember that sentence more clearly than anything else she said that night. I said, "So you knew I might say no." She looked away. "You didn't ask because you wanted an answer," I said. "You did it in public because you wanted pressure. That's not fair. Is it wrong?" She didn't answer. Instead, she started listing Trevor's problems: his rent, his breakup, the debt, the fact that he had been sleeping badly, the fact that Janice was worried about him. Some of it was serious. Some of it was stuff adults deal with when their lives fall apart. I said I wasn't debating whether Trevor deserved help. "I'm deciding what happens to my property." Maya's face changed at the word my. "We've been married for 11 years, she said. "Everything is suddenly yours now." "No. The cabin was inherited from my father, and you know that. I share it with you because I want to. That's not the same as you having the right to hand it to someone else." She said, "You're making this about ownership because you don't want to help him." I said, "No. You're making this about helping him so you don't have to admit you went behind my back." We got nowhere. Before we went to bed, I told her clearly that nobody was to enter the cabin or move anything into it until we had resolved the issue. She said, "Fine." I believed "fine" meant she was angry but understood me. 2 days later, I drove out to the cabin. I told myself I was just checking the locks and making sure the spare key issue was settled. But the truth is, something about Trevor's reaction at dinner and Maya's certainty had been bothering me. The first thing I noticed was that the porch lockbox had been opened recently. The code was one I had never given Trevor. Inside, I found 3 cardboard boxes by the couch, a duffel bag in the back bedroom, a laundry basket full of clothes, and a stack of kitchen supplies still in store bags. For a second, I just stood there staring at it. It wasn't enough stuff to say Trevor had fully moved in, but it was enough to make it clear that someone had decided the conversation was over without me. Then I saw a few sheets of paper on the kitchen counter. The top page said, "Cabin rental agreement." It was simple. 6 months, $900 a month, utilities handled separately, a line saying the tenant would keep the property clean and report damage. Trevor's signature was at the bottom. So was Maya's. Under owner/landlord, she had signed her own name. I read it twice. Then I heard a car outside. Trevor came in carrying another box. He stopped when he saw me. "Oh," he said. "Maya said you probably wouldn't be here today." I held up the papers. "What is this?" His expression moved from surprise to irritation. "The lease." "What lease?" He set the box down. "The one I paid for." That was the moment my anger toward him shifted into something else. "You paid her?" "Yeah, 6 months." "How much?" $900 a month, $5,400 total. I looked back at the paper. Trevor said, "I'm not squatting here, Andrew. You paid Maya to rent something she never asked me about." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "She does not own this cabin." "She said you guys agreed." "No. She announced it to me at dinner at the same time she announced it to you." He stared at me. "No," he said slowly. "She said the dinner thing was just because you were weird about family stuff, and she wanted to make it official in front of everybody." I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. "Did she tell you I agreed before that dinner?" "Yes." The confidence started to drain from his face. He reached for the agreement, looked at Maya's signature, then looked back at me. "You're saying she couldn't sign this?" "I'm saying she never asked the person whose name is on the deed." He ran both hands over his face. For the first time, I understood why he had looked uncomfortable at dinner. He thought he was walking into an arrangement I had already reluctantly approved, and then he watched me act like I had never heard of it. That didn't erase his responsibility. He knew it was my father's cabin. He knew I cared about it. He could have called me once before moving boxes in. But he wasn't simply trying to get 6 months of free housing. I told him not to bring anything else inside. He immediately got defensive again. Where am I supposed to go? I already gave notice. I'm not throwing your things into the road, I said. Take whatever you need today. We will figure out the rest of your belongings. But this arrangement stops now. You can't expect me to find somewhere in 48 hours. I expect you to call the person you paid and ask her why she sold you something she didn't have the authority to sell. That was sharper than I meant it to be, but I didn't take it back. Trevor grabbed clothes, his duffel, toiletries, and some work things. I told him I would be back the next afternoon, and if he wanted the remaining boxes, I would meet him there. He did. After he removed his things, I changed the locks. I didn't dump anything outside. I didn't keep his property. He hadn't spent a night there yet, and I made sure all his belongings were out before I secured the place. I also pulled out the deed paperwork when I got home because after seeing Maya sign as owner, I wanted the documents in front of me, not just my memory of them. The ownership was exactly as I knew it was. My name. That evening, Maya came home furious. You changed the locks? After Trevor removed his things. You made him give up the cabin. I never gave him the cabin. He paid for 6 months. That was the opening I needed. Where is the $5,400? She stopped. It was a small pause, but I saw it. I asked again, where is Trevor's money? She walked to the refrigerator, opened it, stared inside without taking anything out, then closed it. It's still family money. That is not what I asked. I deposited it. Where? Our accounts. Which account? She said, why are you interrogating me? Because you accepted rent on my property without telling me. She slammed her palm lightly against the counter. Stop saying my property like I'm some stranger who broke into your life. I am your wife. And I am your husband. Did that stop you from signing a decision on my behalf? I did not sign your name. No. You signed yours where the owner's name was supposed to be. She called it a paperwork issue. I said a paperwork issue was putting the wrong date on a form. This was her creating a 6-month agreement she knew I hadn't approved. Then she said something that made me more suspicious than the lease itself. I was going to handle all of it. You didn't need to turn it into an audit. An audit? That word stuck with me. The next morning, after I dropped Mia off, I logged into our accounts. I had access to all of them. There was no hacking, guessing passwords, or sneaking through Maya's phone. These were joint accounts I had simply gotten lazy about reviewing because Maya handled most of our bill tracking. For years, she had been better at it than I was. She liked spreadsheets. I hated sitting at the kitchen table sorting categories. I looked at the big picture, made sure we were saving, checked the credit cards occasionally, and trusted her on the details. That trust was a choice I had made, so was not verifying anything for months. Our repair and emergency fund should have been healthy. We had been feeding money into it consistently. When I opened the statement history, I saw a recent deposit of $5,400. That got my attention immediately. I clicked backward through the prior months. Then I found the first transfer out. $6,000. A little over a month later, another one. $4,500. Then a third. $7,000. Total, $17,500. All three had gone out over a period of months. I sat there with a calculator even though I didn't need one, adding the numbers twice because I wanted some other answer to appear. The $5,400 from Trevor had gone back into that same fund. Suddenly, all the weird little moments rearranged themselves. The fund is fine. Trevor saying he would pay Maya back every dollar. Maya delaying the repair discussion. Her asking whether we were going to use the cabin. The spare keys disappearing. The lease wasn't the beginning. It was a patch. When Maya got home, I had the statements open on my laptop at the kitchen table. She knew what I had found before I said anything. Her bag slid off her shoulder onto the chair. Andrew. $17,500. She closed her eyes. I said, tell me I'm reading this wrong. She sat down across from me. You're not. I had prepared myself for denial. Somehow, the direct admission made me feel worse. Where did it go? To Trevor. All of it. Not in one check. I paid things as they came up. What things? She listed them: past due rent after his breakup, a credit card balance that had gotten ugly, a security deposit, car repairs, a couple of smaller debts that had become urgent because he had been moving money around trying to keep everything afloat. I asked, "Did your mother know?" Maya hesitated. She knew I was helping. That wasn't my question. She didn't know the exact amounts. I leaned back in my chair. So Trevor owes us $17,500. He owes me. No, you took it from a joint reserve. Her face hardened. I was putting it back. After taking it without telling me. He is my brother. And I'm your husband. He was falling apart. I am not asking why you care about him. You would have said no. There it is again. She stood up and started pacing. I knew you would make it about whether he deserved the help. I knew you would tell me we can't keep rescuing him. I knew you would say we had our own responsibilities. And maybe you would have been right. But at the time, he needed somebody. What you mean is you knew I might not agree, so you removed my ability to disagree. She turned around. I was going to fix it before it became your problem. It became my problem when you used our money and my property. She told me Trevor had recently sold some things and finally had a little cash. He wanted to start paying her back. That was when she came up with the cabin idea. She said she didn't want him to feel like she was taking money from him while also letting him stay somewhere. So she called it rent. 6 months at $900 a month. He paid $5,400 up front. She put that money back into the repair fund, lowering the hidden shortage from $17,500 to $12,100. Then, she said, she planned to keep replacing the rest from her own discretionary money and whatever Trevor repaid until the numbers were back where they belonged. And then what? I asked. I never noticed. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I thought I could make it right before you had to know. That sentence scared me more than if she had said she didn't care. Because Maya cared deeply. She cared about Trevor. She cared about me. She cared about our marriage. She had just decided caring gave her permission to lie until reality matched the story she wanted to tell. We argued for hours that night. At one point, I lost control of my tone. I told her, if Trevor steps into that cabin again, you can go with him. The second the words were out, I knew they were wrong. Maya stared at me like I had slapped the table between us. I was furious, but I didn't actually mean I would throw my wife out because her brother crossed a porch. I apologized for the way I said it. I should not have threatened our marriage like that. I told her the next day. That was too far. Then I added, but I am not changing the boundary. Trevor does not use the cabin. She said my apology didn't mean much if I was still punishing her. I said I was sorry for the threat, not for taking back control of the property. For the next week, Maya slept in the guest room. Mia noticed almost immediately. One morning, she asked me why Mom had clothes in the other room. I told her, your mom and I are working through something. She asked, are you mad at each other? I said, we're having a hard time. We both love you. You don't need to fix anything. That last sentence hit me harder than I expected. Later that week, Mia asked why we weren't going to the cabin that weekend as we had talked about earlier in the summer. Maya and I looked at each other across the kitchen. We'll go another time, I said. Maya looked down at her coffee. Whatever this was between us, I wasn't going to make our 8-year-old carry messages or choose sides. To Maya's credit, she agreed. We didn't discuss Trevor, money, or the cabin in front of Mia. But kids don't need details to know when the air in a house has changed. A few days after finding the transfers, I changed where my future paychecks went. I opened an individual account and directed my paycheck there. From that account, I transferred my share of our mortgage, utilities, insurance, groceries, Mia's expenses, and the other normal household costs into the joint checking account. I didn't empty the joint account. I didn't freeze Maya's access to household money. I didn't stop paying bills. I changed the flow of new money because I no longer trusted the system we had been using. Maya saw the change and confronted me that night. So now I need permission to use money? No. That is exactly what this is. No. Your income is still yours to direct. The joint account still pays the house expenses. I am not taking money away from you. You are separating yourself from me financially. Yes. She looked hurt by how quickly I answered. I said, I need proof that shared money is actually shared. Right now, I don't have that. She called it financial punishment. I told her punishment would have been draining the accounts or refusing to pay for anything connected to her. I was doing neither. But I am not putting every new dollar I earn into an account you treated as if you had sole authority over, I said. That conversation didn't end well either. Then Janice got involved. I started getting calls from relatives I didn't normally hear from. Nobody came at me screaming. It was more subtle than that. A cousin called to check in and then mentioned Trevor was scrambling for housing. An uncle asked if I had really locked Maya out of our money. Denise called me and said Janice was telling people I had thrown Trevor out of a place he had paid for because I resented how close Maya was to him. I asked Denise what exactly Janice was saying about the cabin. That you knew he needed it, she said. That Maya worked out a family rate, and then you changed your mind because you wanted to make a point. That is not what happened. I figured there was another side. I told her the simple version. I had never agreed. I discovered Trevor's things after the anniversary dinner. Maya had signed an agreement as the landlord. Denise was quiet for a moment. Did Trevor pay? Yes. That makes this messy, eh? I know. She said she still thought I could have given Trevor more time. I said I understood why she thought that. Then she asked, did Maya tell him you agreed? Yes. Denise sighed. That part is not okay. I still didn't mention the $17,500. At that point, I was trying to keep at least one part of the disaster inside the marriage. Janice made that harder. She called me directly a few days later. People remember who showed up when things were bad, she said. I showed up for Trevor before. Then why is this different? Because I'm not volunteering something this time. Maya volunteered it for me. You have a place sitting empty while he is struggling. That does not make it yours to assign. She said, this is what I mean. Everything is ownership and rules with you. I said, it became about ownership when someone who didn't own the cabin signed a rental agreement for it. Janice told me I was treating family like strangers. I told her she was treating my boundaries like a technical inconvenience. After that, she stopped calling me and started calling Maya more. I could usually tell when Janice had called because Maya would come out of the conversation angry all over again. Her mother's position was simple. Trevor needed help. Maya had always been the one who could calm him down and solve things, and I was making the situation harder because I was too rigid. One evening, I overheard enough of Maya's side to hear her say, Mom, stop. I know what Andrew did. I am the one living here. That was the first sign I saw that something in her was starting to shift. Trevor called me himself a few days later. He had found a room he could rent, but it cost more than the cabin arrangement. He sounded tired, not angry. I need to ask you something, he said. Did you change your mind, or did you never agree? I never agreed. Not even before the dinner? No. He was quiet. Then he said, she told me you said yes, but you weren't happy about it. I didn't know there was a 6-month plan until she put the keys on the table. Trevor swore under his breath. I asked, why didn't you call me? He gave me an answer I actually believed. Because she said you were going to make it awkward, and I didn't want to hear you tell me I was a screw-up. I said, I probably would have told you I thought 6 months was too long. Yeah. But I would have told you directly. I know. He apologized for moving boxes in without checking with me. It was not a dramatic apology. He just said, I should have called you. I didn't. That's on me. I accepted the apology, but I didn't offer him the cabin again. He also asked when Maya was giving him his money back. I told him, you paid Maya. You need to work that out with Maya. He didn't like that answer. Neither did she. But I was done acting as the cleanup crew for an agreement I had never made. Eventually, Denise suggested we all meet in person because, in her words, everybody is arguing with a different version of the story. I didn't want a family summit. The idea sounded exhausting. But Janice was still telling relatives I had first approved the cabin and then revoked it. Trevor had begun questioning Maya's version. Maya and I were talking in circles at home. So I agreed on one condition. Mia would not be there. We met at Denise's house on a Saturday afternoon. It was me, Maya, Trevor, Janice, and Denise. The first 10 minutes were exactly what I expected. Janice said I had taken a marriage issue and turned it into a property dispute. You are treating 11 years of marriage like a property dispute, she told me. I said, the property is part of the problem. The lying is the bigger part. She said I was using a technicality to punish Maya. Denise interrupted. Did Andrew actually say yes? Or did everybody assume Maya could speak for him? Janice started answering for Maya. Trevor cut her off. No, I want to hear this. He looked at Maya. You told me he already said yes. Maya's face went pale. She said, I told you he understood you needed somewhere. No, Trevor said. You told me he agreed. You said he was being difficult about the details, but he agreed. Janice said, that is basically the same thing. Trevor turned on her. No, it isn't. That was the first time I had ever heard him push back on his mother that quickly. Maya rubbed her forehead. I knew he would probably say no if I asked the wrong way, she said. I said, there was no right way to ask that guaranteed a yes. She looked at me. That is exactly why I was trying to solve it first. Trevor stared at her. You made me look like I moved into his place knowing he didn't want me there. I was trying to keep you from feeling like a charity case. So you lied to me. Maya didn't answer. Janice started talking again about how Trevor had been in a bad place and people did desperate things when family needed help. I looked at Maya. I hadn't planned to bring up the money unless Janice kept portraying the whole situation as me changing my mind over a cabin. I had told Maya that if the family stopped repeating false versions, I would not discuss our finances with them. But we were sitting there because the false version had not stopped. I said, the cabin isn't the first thing Maya hid. Maya's eyes snapped toward me. Janice said, what is that supposed to mean? I ignored her and looked at Maya. Do you want to tell Trevor about the $17,500? Trevor frowned. The what? Maya said, Andrew, don't. I said, your mother has told people I suddenly decided not to help him. That is not true. If we are here to settle what actually happened, then what actually happened didn't start at dinner. Trevor looked at his sister. Maya. She started crying quietly. Not loudly. Not theatrically. She just covered her mouth for a second and then said, I helped you with more than I told Andrew. Trevor looked confused. How much more? $17,500 over a few months. The room went still, but not in the movie way where everyone freezes and stares. Denise leaned back. Janice immediately said Maya didn't have to justify helping her brother. Trevor looked genuinely sick. He said, you told me some of that was your money. It was our reserve, Maya said. His too. Yes. Trevor looked at me. I said nothing. Then he looked back at Maya. Was my rent supposed to pay him back? Partly. You told me it was so I could feel like I was paying my own way. It was both. He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. So, I paid you rent for his cabin to replace money you took from both of you to give to me. Maya whispered. I was putting it back. I said, after taking it without telling me. Janice told me I didn't need to repeat myself like I was prosecuting my wife. Denise said, Janice, stop. Janice looked offended. Denise continued, helping Trevor is one thing. Signing for Andrew's cabin and moving $17,000 without telling him is another. Janice said Maya had been under pressure. That was when Maya finally spoke about something deeper than the money. She said that since she was a teenager, whenever Trevor struggled, Janice would call her. When he failed a class, Maya helped him make a plan. When he got into trouble with bills, Maya helped him organize them. When he went through breakups, Maya took the calls. When Janice was afraid he was going to spiral, she told Maya, your brother doesn't need another person judging him. Maya said she had spent years believing that if Trevor fell apart while she had the ability to help, then she had failed him. I thought I could fix it before it became Andrew's problem, she said. I looked at her. I can understand why you did it, and still refuse to live with how you did it. She nodded, crying harder now. Janice said, so what? You are going to throw away your marriage because she helped her brother? I said, no. I am deciding whether the marriage can keep operating like nothing happened. And that was the part one had been avoiding. Up until then, everything I had done was tactical. Get Trevor's belongings out, change the locks, check the accounts, redirect my pay, stop the immediate damage. But none of that answered whether I was willing to keep living with Maya, as if trust was just temporarily bruised. I told them I was not filing for divorce that day. I also said I was not going back to the old arrangement. The separate flow of new income was staying for now. We would continue paying all family expenses. Maya would have full visibility into what I transferred, and I expected the same transparency from her. The cabin was off limits to Trevor and to Janice. I was not reopening that argument. And if Maya wanted me to consider rebuilding the marriage instead of moving toward divorce, I wanted counseling and a complete accounting of every transfer, loan, payment, or promise involving Trevor. Not because I wanted to humiliate her, because I no longer knew what I didn't know. Maya said, "You want a structured separation?" Yes. What does that mean? It means we stop pretending this is a normal rough patch. We make decisions deliberately. We protect Mia from the conflict. We go to counseling. We keep the household stable. And we see whether trust can actually be rebuilt. She looked devastated. I felt awful saying it. But for the first time since the anniversary dinner, I also felt like I was saying something that matched reality. Trevor moved into a rented room the following week. It cost him more than $900 a month and was nowhere near as comfortable as the cabin would have been. He complained about it once to me, then caught himself and said, "I know, not your problem." I appreciated that more than he probably realized. He asked Maya for the $5,400 back. She had already put it into our joint reserve, which meant refunding him created another hole. I refused to take the money out of my separate account to solve that for her. Maya ended up paying Trevor back from her own available money over a short period, including money she would normally have used for personal spending. It was not instant, and it was not painless. The remaining shortage in our reserve became part of a written repayment plan between Maya and me. She would restore it over time from her portion of discretionary income. Every month, we reviewed the balance together. That was one of the strangest consequences of the whole thing. Before this, I had trusted her enough that we barely discussed routine transfers. Afterward, we sat at the same table once a month and looked at numbers line by line. It felt colder. It was also more honest. Counseling was not some magical switch. The first few sessions were ugly. Maya kept coming back to the fact that she had been trying to prevent a crisis. I kept coming back to the fact that she had lied to prevent me from stopping her. Our counselor eventually put it in language Maya could hear without immediately defending herself. She had treated my likely disagreement as a logistical obstacle instead of information that mattered. That became the issue we worked on most. I also had my own work to do. I had to admit that I had spent years trying so hard not to be controlling that I sometimes used trust as an excuse not to have uncomfortable conversations. I had seen Maya overfunction for Trevor before. I had rolled my eyes privately, disagreed mildly, and then stepped aside because I considered it her family problem. It stopped being just her family problem when the resources became ours. I had also become colder than I liked after the discovery. The threat about Maya leaving with Trevor was not the only time my tone crossed into something harsher than necessary. I started responding to every emotional explanation like it was an attempt to manipulate me. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was just my wife trying to explain how she had gotten herself into a terrible decision. Learning to hear the explanation without treating it as an excuse took me a while. Trevor and I ended up in a strange place. We were not friends. I did not trust his judgment, and I still believed he had been too willing to accept arrangements built on somebody else's resources without asking enough questions. But I stopped seeing him as the main villain. He had been lied to, too. He eventually started paying Maya back for some of what she had covered for him before the cabin situation. The payments were small. There was no miraculous turnaround. He was still dealing with debt and higher rent. Once, he said to me, "I think I got used to making plans based on who would catch me if they failed." I said, "That sounds about right." He gave me an annoyed look, then laughed. That was about as warm as our relationship got. Janice took much longer to accept any part of what happened. Actually, accept is probably too generous. She still believes I made everything bigger than it needed to be. She still says Trevor could have stayed at the cabin while Maya and I worked things out. She still thinks redirecting my paycheck was a punishment. What changed was Maya. A couple of months into counseling, Janice called her because Trevor had another problem. Not a housing crisis this time. Something smaller, but apparently urgent enough that Janice expected Maya to fix it. I was in the kitchen when Maya answered. She listened for a while. Then she said, "No, Mom." There was a pause. "No, he can call me if he wants advice. I'm not paying it." Another pause. "I know what you think." I said no. She hung up. She didn't give me a speech afterward. She just set the phone down and went back to cutting vegetables for dinner. That meant more to me than any apology she had made in the first week. By then, She had also restored a meaningful portion of the missing money. Not all of it. We were still working through the plan. But the number on the account matched the number on our tracking sheet every month, and there were no mystery transfers. Our marriage was different. We were still together, but not because I had decided the whole thing was a wash and forgiven her. We were together because Maya was doing the work, and because I was willing to watch whether the work lasted. There were things she no longer had automatic access to. The cabin was one of them. A few months after the anniversary dinner, I took Mia there for a weekend. It was the first time I had stayed overnight since changing the locks. Mia noticed immediately that the key looked different. "Did you get a new one?" she asked. "Yeah." "Why?" "The old lock needed changing." That was technically true, and it was enough for an 8-year-old. She also asked why Maya was not coming. I said, "We're working on some things." Mia nodded like kids do when they know adults are giving them the short version. We spent most of Saturday cleaning leaves off the porch, making grilled cheese, and trying to get Mia to cast a fishing line without hooking a tree branch behind her. That evening, after she went to bed, I stood by the door looking at the wooden key rack my father had made. It had 2 little hooks. For years, one key had been mine, and the spare had been wherever Maya put it after a trip. The old spare key was one of the keys she had placed in Trevor's hand at our anniversary dinner. I had kept it in a drawer after changing the locks. Now I had 2 new keys. I hung one on the wooden rack. I put the second in my pocket. That was where things stood. Maya was still going to counseling with me. She was still paying the money back. She had stopped rescuing Trevor behind my back. She had started telling Janice no without asking me to be the bad guy for her. I was not using the cabin to punish her forever, but I was not going to pretend access and trust came back automatically because we had made progress. The next morning, Mia grabbed her jacket and asked if we could fish before breakfast. I took the key off the wooden hook and locked the door behind us. The second hook stayed empty. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.